Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the vodQA Shorts Bangalore. So today we have two sessions lined up. One is the testing strategy in micro-frontend architecture by Vishal and Brijendra. And the second one is the art of creating a performance strategy by Bharat and Samar. And me and Deep will be the host for the event. So for the topic introduction, it's Deep. Please introduce the topic.
Okay, so first topic is our front-end testing. This edition of Vodka aims at taking you to another level altogether, where you get a wider perspective of testing. So let us meet more evangelists to talk and learn about the vast spectrum of ideas in the realm of testing. So I'll just give a brief about what it is, and then the speakers, then Sayantan can introduce the speakers. So front-end monolith is divided into multiple micro frontends to follow all the advantages of microservices world. In this talk, we would like to share our experience on testing strategy when there are multiple micro frontends integrating inside a single application. There are multiple topics which will be covered by Vishal and Brijendra. Over to you, Satya. Santan.
Okay. We have two speakers for this topic. So a small introduction about Vishal and Brijendra. Vishal is a front-end engineer with a 9 years of experience in building a high-performance applications. He has led multiple projects in React and has been a curator for different courses for Thoughtworks community. With micro-frontend space picking up its pace, he has been involved in bootstrapping project with micro-frontends and has been sharing his experience with the community. Brijendra is a senior QA with 10 plus years of experience. He has rich experience in test automation techniques, building need-based testing solution for the fast-paced agile environment. Highly skilled in the mobile web automations using Selenium, Appium, Detox, and for all kinds of apps for different platforms. It's a web, Android, and iOS. Over to you, Brijal and Brijendra.
Thanks a lot for the introduction, Sayatan and Lee. So I'll share the screen. Yeah, can you see the screen now?
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Super, thank you. So I think we already have a brief introductory part of what micro frontends are, and this talk is mostly around the testing strategy in micro frontend architecture. But before pitching into the testing strategy, we would like to introduce you to the word related to micro frontend. So to start with, let's go to the history of architectural word, how the architect has evolved from the last few years. So if you remember this, I think in few some years back we used to write our front end and back end code in the same repo, and that's being called as a monolith architecture. Uh, we aren't saying that these monoliths are bad now, but the whole idea is that maybe if your application grows, the monolith might not be a good fit for your application. But again, if you are starting with a new application, maybe you are building an MVP, then monoliths are still a good choice. Then those monoliths we started breaking up from the backend side, and that is where the word of microservices came into picture. We say that instead of having a single service running all the features of APIs and all, break those into multiple microservices. We all know the term, correct? It's being in the market for quite some time now. So we also know the advantages of it. Like it gives us the strong module boundaries. We get independent deployment, and again, each service can follow its own technology. Depends upon the problem that you are trying to solve in a particular service. But even after dividing the backend word, we still continue to use a UI monolith, correct? So that means my single front end code base is actually talking to all the different microservices that we are building. So even if you say that my microservices word is giving me an advantage of independent deployment, independent teams and all, but still if I have to release a new feature which is end to end, again that involves a front end code base plus a back end code base, you are still dependent on other teams from the front end specific things, correct? You have to talk to other teams and say, oh, if I want to release a particular feature which is related to service 3, can you make sure everything else is working fine? So even after breaking, like the backend world, we are still not independently deploying the things on the end-to-end application world. So it's mostly a monolith UI. So that is where, to solve this problem, the word of micro frontends has comes into existence. It's the same thing as microservices, but now on the front end world, not on the back end side. So if I just read out the definition here, micro frontends is an architectural decision pattern to break down the monoliths UI to a smaller and manageable deployable units. So what, again, microservices promises whatever the advantages we get from microservices, plus you now get a more clear independent releases. So we'll talk about that in detail a bit more, like how to do micro frontends also. So given this introduction, I'll briefly talk about the agenda of this talk. So now we understand the term micro frontends. We'll talk about a very quick advantages of it. We'll also go through an example of micro frontends, which will be the base to talk about all the next set of things that we are going to think. How to build, how to integrate micro frontends. We'll also demo a micro frontend application also, and then we will start with our actual testing strategy. What are the advantages of this particular architecture in terms of testing? What challenges you can definitely face in this? And in the end, why the collaboration is very important in this type of an architecture. So to start with, now we have understood the term. So we know that what advantages we are getting. We are getting independent teams. Now the teams means that you are getting an independent end-to-end team. If you are dividing the whole application by following the concept of bounded context or domain boundaries, you actually can get a team which is working on the same set of services plus micro frontends. So that means you are responsible only for a part of your application. Again, if teams becomes independent, you are independently releasing the features. Your code is simple and decoupled, and you can always incrementally upgrade the only that portion of your whole application. So this is a very quick example of what split you can see on Amazon product details page. So if let's imagine that if you are building this particular page, correct, and if you follow the right division, this is what we see as separate micro frontends. Like your product summary can be coming from a catalog as a micro frontend. Your recommendation can be coming from a recommendation as a micro frontend. Customer reviews are totally different. You give a product ID to that micro frontend or a microservice. Uh, you actually fetch the reviews for that particular product only. So that becomes a totally different feature set itself. But it's all coming together in a single page. So that is one way of orchestrating micro frontends. Like a same page can have multiple micro frontends, and give again depends upon your UX, depends upon your integration patterns. A single screen can be a different micro frontend also, or or a single screen can hold multiple micro frontends also. So a very quick example of micro frontends. What are the ways, again, why we are talking about these terms, just to set the context of uh, in the previous slide we saw like how we can split it. Now how we can make all these micro frontend come together in a single app, and that is where the orchestrating part of micro frontend comes into picture. You can do it at build time, which is very similar to uh, uh, let's imagine the Java word, correct? We used to create jar files. So jar as a package come together to build a single app. Similarly, in the front end word, you create npm packages, and you release a particular version of that npm package, and that package can be composed inside a single container app to build the micro frontends at build time. Now, the second way to do it is at runtime. That means you don't need to create an npm package. You just hit a URL, which gives you the build or an artifact, and you can load that artifact runtime on client side, even at edge side, or even at server side. So there are multiple ways to do it at runtime, and runtime being works really well in case of web micro frontends. Yeah, so I'll quickly demo a very small application that we have built using micro-frontend architecture so that we can utilize the same terminology while we are discussing the testing strategy of that. So if you see, this is running locally right now. I have tried to deploy a few of those into Netlify, but I'll demo that in the last. So right now, this is a catalog micro frontend, which is running on localhost 8080. So if I just refresh it, you will see that the products are coming in. If I click on any product, it will take me to the product details page, similar to what we saw on the Amazon, correct? So inside that product detail page, this details is still coming from the same micro frontend. But as I mentioned, the ratings or reviews are coming from a different micro frontend. Now, moving on, 8082 is actually running the cart as a micro frontend. So if I quickly say add this product to cart, the cart count is increased. And if I refresh this page now, you will see that the same product, you can see that in the cart as a micro frontend. It's a totally different build altogether running on 8082. And similar to what we saw on the product details page, you can independently run that rating and reviews as a micro frontend also. Later on, it gets orchestrated inside the same page, but you can always run that independently here. So three different micro frontends independently running, and that means it can be independently deployed also. But they have to all come together as a single application. That is where we are saying that localhost 3000, or let's say ecommerce.com or cbpmarketplace.com, is my actual application, which is orchestrating all the different micro frontends now. So again, this is a separate URL, which are now saying if you hit product, I will load the product micro frontend for you. If I go inside the product, I can always add a cart, add a product to the cart. I can go back. I can always again add a product to the cart. And if I go to the cart page, I could always see that what products I have added to the cart and the total of it. So that becomes your end-to-end application working by orchestrating multiple micro frontends. So we are going to talk about all these different things like catalog, cart, reviews in the how to do the testing part of this also. So moving on. Yeah, over to you, Bridge, for this.
Yep. Thanks, Vishal. So now we have seen a demo of how micro frontend application looks like, and you might have seen there are different micro frontend components like cart, review, and product catalog. Now, while forming a team of micro frontend, certain key decisions needs to be taken care. What are those key take decisions? So first thing is, how would you actually slice your micro frontends? Slicing means, so right now we see three components like cart, product catalog, and reviews. So these are logically or domain wise, we have sliced it. And this is how we understand the scope of one particular macro front end and can be independently taken care of. The second part would be as you slice these micro front ends, then at the end, our goal is to how would you orchestrate or integrate all these components all together to make it as a wholesome app. And the third would be some of these micro front ends might need to communicate with each other. So how would you provision micro front end, inter micro front end communication? Last but not the least, how would you actually test these macro front ends? And that is where our talks come into picture. And we'll see where certain advantages this macro front end strategy has, how we can make a changes here and there and include certain tips and tricks to make our strategy or quality strategy more efficient in terms of satisfying the needs of macro front end architecture. Now, we have seen this micro frontend had lots of potential in terms of how we can have it independent teams, correct? Now, if we try to consider testing approach, then we all are aware of this test pyramid, right? We understand how we can divide our test into multiple testing layers and how we can also incorporate our acceptance test into these multiple testing layers, and this gives us certain amount of confidence to us, like we have a good automation test coverage in each layer, and we are not bloating any faster side layers which gives us feedback at later point of time, or maybe may have a little bit costly at the terms of maintenance. But while we are suggesting you can have test pyramid or micro front ends, and actually independent macro front ends can have their independent uh, uh, test pyramid approach as well. Like cart can have its own test pyramid approach. Product catalog can have its own test pyramid approach. Similarly, a review. And if you have any other kind of application, if they have multiple components, then based on your components needs, you can think of which particular part of the application you are dealing with, and based on that you can tailor made your testing layers. But since now you are only testing your components in isolation till now, since we have seen these components can be tested in isolation, but what about the approach of where you say what will happen once we start integration? Then you need to think of coming up with another layer of testing, the end-to-end testing, where all these components are orchestrated all together or integrated all together and makes an application. So if you try and understand these switch these layers of ways of testing, then your independent testing layers may have its own gaps, correct? Unit tests may not be able to identify all the bugs that may come into picture. Some other layers may be able to tackle it. And while you build these various layers of defense to your testing strategy, it may happen in your component testing, you may miss something that can only be found or maybe tested once you integrate all this component all together, wherein this Swiss cheese model test strategy come into picture. And this talks about you can have your acceptance test divided into individual layers as well. Now moving next.
I'll just add one more point here. So the whole idea is that since each micro front end is independent, correct? So the pyramid plus Swiss cheese cornice model all is applicable to independent micro front ends. But what we are proposing here is that you might need one more layer to make sure the whole application is also working fine together. And that is why we are saying that you might need this layer where the whole where you are running the whole end-to-end suite on top of your application, not only on top of your microfront. Yeah,
Correct. Now we have heard little bit of advantages of this macro front-end architecture. Now let's see with these advantages how we accommodate our testing and how we leverage our testing needs in there. So if we move on to the next slide, we'll see how we used to test our microservices. So we'll try to make a parallel with how we can do the similar approach in macro front-ends as well. So you might have seen in the demo app, we had three different parts of the application like cart, uh, product catalog and reviews. So if you might already be familiar with the services part, so how would you independent test? So you have cart service, you have service pipeline, and you have APIs, and you fire those APIs and you test it out like how these things are working. The same thing you do it with catalog and reviews. But once you integrate these APIs to some other applications, then you may start thinking, okay, till dev queue you can do it independently, but once it comes to a higher environment like UAT, maybe you need to start integration. And then you think of, okay, now we'll do it with the integration app, maybe mocking, stubbing will be required here and there, and you will try to devise that approach of testing. Now, in similar ways, now you have front end also divided based on these services or maybe the domains that you have sliced through. Now you have cart as an independent macro frontend or independent application. You can think about it, and it will have its own URL. Like Vishal have shown you in the demo part, some of these services are running on 8081, 8082, or 8083 port, but the main application is running on 3000 port. Similarly, once you are developing, you will have different URLs for different environment for these apps, and these are independent of any other applications. So if you move next, we'll see cart MFE, we'll see catalog MFE, and we'll also see review services or review MFE. Now, if suppose this application would not have been divided into micro front end, then how would you test it? So you will have a single you will have a single front end, and all your front end will be dependent on these three services. So suppose as a catalog, if some new features come into catalog, you won't be able to deliver it until all the combination permutation is set up with cart and review. And if something, suppose cart has some certain issues, then as a QA, we will not be able to certify or say the build is ready to be deployed or to be promoted to the higher build, because it has some kind of dependence. But here in the micro front-end world, we see these are completely independent, and this gives us a strength. So if we move next, we'll see while we are testing, suppose if we are part of catalog micro front-end, we'll see we can forget about all other micro front-ends and can do the testing. We can plan our testing independently for this particular micro front-end without any obstruction, or maybe if there is any open issue on any other MFE, then it won't stop us testing and deploying to the higher environment. And this will also give us a faster feedback, because we are not blocked, we are not waiting for the final integration. As soon as we build the feature for catalog, we test it out, and we have it QA ready, and we plan it for a deployment, then maybe we can go to the higher environments. So we move next, we'll see what kind of advantages this isolation gives. So Vishal, if you could move next, we'll see, since we have identified, we have seen, we have been hearing, okay, MFE can be independently tested, in isolation can be tested. Then if we say, then it has an advantage, like tailor-made quality strategy can be built for individual MFE. Why I'm saying so? Um, so, um, so your MFE components can have their specific needs, like cart may have its specific need or use case, a product catalog, it may have searches and everything, its own needs, also the reviews. And based on the kind of testing you want to perform, you can look for the specific use case and you can include it in your particular test pyramid structure, or maybe your quality structure or quality strategy scope. So if we move next, we'll see, so what kind of tailor-made quality strategy concepts you can think of including? So suppose if we talk about catalog, then there are a lot of searches involved in here. Okay, people are searching, filtering, things are happening, and based on that, you may think, okay, a performance test is needed in here. Maybe performance test is not needed in cart, but it's really needed in a catalog MFE. So maybe you can think of planning a performance test solution for this particular MFE itself, and may not be able to repeat it to cart or any other MFE. Similar ways, you can pick and choose the way you want to work on this particular scope of the application, your ways of working. You can pick your own definition of done. If you want to do a security testing, you can include all those security pipeline checks into your MFE pipelines and whatnot. It's totally an independent team, and you can do it. So it gives you that independence. That is what we wanted to highlight. Now we move next, we'll see, since these are independent that we have established, now they have its own test pyramid approaches as well. Now this also gives us an independence of choosing our own automation solution as well. So your card service may have its own unit test solution. You can do its UI automation or API automation or service integration based on whichever tool you want to, based on whichever tech stacks devs have picked up to build this micro front end or microservices, or whichever you are more compatible with. So the intention here is to highlight independent micro front end teams can have their own tech solutions, even the testing tech solutions, while solving the quality problems for this particular application. So if we move next, we'll see a catalog MFE have its own automation solution using tool Y. And similarly, a review MFE can have its own automation solution using tool C. So it's totally up to the team how they have how different use cases they have, and which tools satisfy the most need of that particular use case, and based that you can pick and choose. Now we move next, we'll see with these things coming up, um, So now this gives us an independent picture. Now our pipeline can be independent, our testing approaches can be independent. And since our pipeline and we don't have any independence with any other MFE, then this gives us a high quality E2Es. Now you ask, how come I can say these E2Es, whatever automation we are building, will have high quality? Because these UI will not have any, this MFE will not have any dependency with any other component of the application. You might have seen in big applications, if there are multiple domains are involved, if any one particular domain has an issue, then kind of your flow or your feature is also blocked, because you won't be able to run your automation. Here and there your script will fail and you will say your environment is not stable and your automation is not giving you correct results. In here we are removing those things, and we can say whatever we are testing, if our automation tests are failing, then definitely there is an issue with an application that we need to fix upon.
Yeah.
Vishal,
One of the real world example that me and Bridge both have worked in a project where one of our micro front end was using Detox for end-to-end testing. But when we integrate that micro front end in the actual end-to-end application, that application uses Selenium WebDriver IO for end-to-end testing. So the idea is that you become totally independent of whatever tools you want to use also. Maybe in one case, Detox works better than WebDriver IO. Similarly, in case of web, maybe Cypress works better than Testcafe or Selenium. So you can pick and choose according to your need. So that's the best part of it.
correct. Now, as we have established, these are independents. So Vishal has already said, as these are independent team or independent component, and they can be independently released. So, okay, saying is really easy. It can be independently released, but as a QA, as a testing strategy, what things you need to think of? So you can have a confidence till dev and QA environment where you say, okay, I have tested my component till QA and I say it works fine, it fulfills all the acceptance criteria, and it doesn't have any defects. And then you say, okay, now we can go into the higher environment like UAT. UAT is where we can start thinking of integrating all other MFE components all together and make an application. And wherein you have to think about, okay, now let's see how your new built feature is compatible with the complete application. So as we have advocated, like your application or your MFE team can have independent automation or testing solutions, but we need not to ignore, as you remember from the Swiss cheese model, we need to have the last layer, last defense layer, we say, where we test our integrated app as well. And it will have a different URL altogether based on which environment you are testing upon. And it will have its own testing solution based on what you are trying to solve. And um, we recommend, so when we say, okay, you have different testing solutions and approaches, and we have already covered the majority of part in our MFE, then what kind of tests we'll try to include in here? Any guesses? So yeah, so maybe we can see. So these tests can be on integration layers. You are not going to test how the feature is working. Suppose now cart, product catalog, and reviews all came together, and it's forming an e-commerce application. Now you need not to test in here in integration layer, like how your product catalog is working. Is the performance is okay with performance catalog, because you have already tested it out. Now what you're going to test in this layer is how this product catalog is integrated with cart, and how it's been integrated with the reviews. Is the complete end-to-end flow with how user will have the journey is being fulfilled in here or not? Or maybe you can call it a business acceptance test, where the complete business is being taken care. And now it makes your life easy, where you say you have tested all the components, you have all the fast feedback, shift left mechanism in the MFE part, and the integration and that part comes into the main app integration things. Now we move next. We'll see the complete demo. Now we have advocated. Now I'll just try to summarize like what we have talked about. So we have said, since these MFEs are independent, they can have independent testing solutions. and the test strategy can be built like that only. Now we'll see in real time how your MFE component and your application, or maybe different MFE, can have different testing solutions altogether. So Vishal will give you a demo on this.
Thanks, Pete. So Srinivas has a question. I think that would get answered from this demo, Srinivas. So hold on to that. If you don't feel comfortable after this, we can answer that question also. So quickly moving to some code. So if you see, the application that I demoed has multiple layers, multiple repositories or micro-frontend: cart, catalog, E2E as the whole application end-to-end test, layout. We have created layout as a micro-frontend, also reviews and route handler for reverse proxy and all. And for the simplicity, we are just creating one mock server. But in real world, you'll have multiple microservices. Now consider the example of a catalog here. So when we saw this, we could see that a catalog has a very small flow. Since this is just an example, we haven't created the actual end-to-end flow of an e-commerce site, but a very simple one where you can go to product details page. Maybe in the real application, you can actually get into a depth of this product details page also. One of the very basic example can be Amazon Pay. So you click on Amazon Pay, it's a whole new application that opens up, which have multiple routes into it. So if you consider Amazon Pay as a micro frontend, then that is where your E2E test specific to that micro frontend will come into picture. The whole application is unit tested. That layers will continue to be there. Unit test is integration test, at service level API test. Everything is there for each micro frontend. But what you will try to cover at your end-to-end level or in your testing strategy is become different. So in this micro frontend, you can easily say that, oh, I could see when I land onto this products catalog page, right now it just renders 20 products to me. So I can say that, oh, the product card count is 20. When I go to any product details page, if I click on the second product, I should see that the title should say me men's casual, whatever is the title. Plus, it should also render ratings and reviews. Very simple suite, just for an example. But here, if you see, this suite is only covering the product catalog as a micro frontend. We never covered what should happen when I click on add to cart. It is actually increasing, it is actually setting up the products into your profile so that later on as a user, I can visit that card also. So that is not covered as a part of this independent suite. But so that means you need to have that automation somewhere, correct? So that is where we are proposing an idea of an application level end-to-end test also. Again, the layers can go here and there according to the application you are working on, but you might need these kind of tests in any application. So if you see the catalog test right now, we have tried to build that in Test Cafe. So this is Test Cafe way of writing tests. But my whole end-to-end application suite is in Cypress. So two totally different tools working in two different repositories. And what we are trying to cover in Cypress here is the end-to-end business level automation, where we are saying that I land onto this particular page, I go to product details, I add to cart. The cart count should becomes 1. I go back, I click on a different product, the cart count becomes 2. Then I go to cart and I could see that my total count of the cart is this. So we never covered this kind of an assertions inside our catalog as an MFE, or we will never cover these assertions in our cart as an MFE. Those are totally two different set of features that we have built. But all together, it should come and we should be automating that also. So imagine the path like you are changing something in your catalog as an MFE where you broke the functionality of this count not increasing. So somewhere you have to write those automation so that you don't deploy or you do not take anything to production which is failing. So that is where this suite will come handy. So if I quickly run this, just let me clear some data so that it works fine. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'll just delete those. Yeah, so now I won't see any item in the cart. If I refresh it, I go cart. Sorry, my bad. As I close this, no. Sorry, I think some server is playing. Okay, I can try hitting this. Yeah, some weird thing is happening here. So if you see now, cart has been cleared, correct? So if I try to run the catalog E2E, let's see if it runs. I hope.
Now, this is a perfect example of MFE dependency. So this question that Srinivas asked. So what if we cover E2Es on GUI level, then it will suffice. So this will have a dependency. Now, suppose if it was not an MFA architecture, then our whole application would have been down. You won't be able to test cart because you have a dependency with your product catalog. Now, with this architecture, now individual components have different automation solution altogether. And if you are a part of cart team, then you are not blocked. That is an advantage.
Correct. Yeah. That's a nice example actually. So now catalog is up again. So I can run the test on top of it. So if you see it's running on Test Cafe. And that's all. So similarly, now my catalog is certified from a QA side, correct? But I need to run something at the application level. So that is where E2E test will come into picture. So as I demoed also, like what type of test we are covering in this E2E, correct? You add a product to a cart, you add multiple products to the cart, and then you go to cart to see that my total sum or total value of my cart is this. Yeah, similar, like again, as Bridge mentioned, now add to cart might not be able to find it. If that means there is some issue in the application layer also. So that you have to fix. So even if you want to deploy only catalog here, you cannot, correct? Because my catalog is certified, but my whole application is still not certified here. So that is why you definitely need this here. So you have to fix this and make sure that whole end-to-end application is always working fine. So that's where this layer will definitely come handy, correct? So if I quickly go to this, so this is a build pipeline that we have tried for the catalog as an MFE, where we are saying that the first step can be again to unit test and build, then you deploy it to dev. So this is a working URL in on Netlify. Once that is done, we are saying that run the E2E at micro frontend level. That means catalog E2Es on Test Cafe will be running here. Once that passes, we are proposing that that's the time where you can deploy to QA, or if you have a staging environment or whatever environment you feel comfortable with. But before deploying to prod or UAT also, you have to run an application level E2Es to make sure that this build is correct on the overall application level also. So that's a very quick demo of the test suite and the CI/CD pipeline. So moving on, again, this is an example of one of our client project where we were building the mobile micro frontends in React Native. And even within that, we made sure that our micro frontends were independently working, independently running, and even our test automation suite were independent. Like if you see Linton Test, build the Android application and run detox on top of that application. Once everything passes, only then publish it as an NPM package or publish the article.
And then
Yeah,
whenever time comes, these packages are being imported to our main app. And then another layer of WebDriver IO Appium test were running to certify the final build. So
correct.
while running this detox test, we were able to do most of the shift left and find earlier feedback. If we haven't done so, then we would have discovered it later once our host app integrate these packages to their app. And again, while looking at this particular example, you might find it might looks very easy, like why we are going into that much of trouble. But think about any enterprise level application. If I just try to give an example of any net banking application, where you go to net banking, you have various domains into your net banking. What can you use? You can use recurring deposit, FD, your stocks, your home loan, your personal loan, your personal details. A lot many things are there, and if you divide it by our teams or domain, then you will understand there are multiple teams actually working together, but they have a single monolith UI, and that sometimes create a bottleneck for them. So if you are working on suppose home loan, you might not be aware of what's actually happening on a personal loan front, and you don't want to bother about it, correct? And if we divide that part and makes a team altogether, and as a home loan, you can independently test, deploy your part, then you will be more happy, I guess, as a team and as a QA, because you have removed that dependency. If personal loan is not working or login is not working on the application, you are not blocked. You can altogether build and test a feature for your home loan. I hope this examples gives a little bit of breadth on what kind of complexity an enterprise application can have. Now
Yes,
we
moving
have
on.
seen, yeah. So now we have seen a lot of advantages. Now let's see what kind of challenges this architecture can have. So based on your build time or your integration pattern, uh, you may choose to. So Vishal, if you do next, then we'll see app level automation might get delayed. Why I'm saying so? Because you are focusing more on a MFE level automation part, correct? And you will start working on the app level automation once you start with the integration, and that might get delayed, but totally depends on your ways of collaboration and ways of working. So that is a possibility, it may happen. Now moving next, you will see an application can have multiple E2E solution and repositories, as you have already seen in Vishal's demo. One catalog is having Test Cafe, and app is having Cypress, and it may happen some of your MFE can also have Performance Suite. Some of your can have Accessibility Suite based on if you have that particular test case or use case coming into your MFE. So you may deal with multiple repositories, and also a duplicacy of test can happen with your MFE and your app level sanity test. But that is okay as far as you know what kind of overlap is there. But these are the challenges that you can think of. Now moving next, um, so as a app, you might be an owner of particular domain, suppose catalog, and if you have to build an E2E solution for an app level, then you need to have some kind of context for an app level where you can add your integration test to the app level E2E. Correct. So that is another kind of challenge wherein you have to expand a little bit, have more collaboration, and understand how an app as a whole works and how you can contribute as an smoke level E2E to that particular app. And last
I,
but
I
the not,
can
yeah.
Yeah, I can add one more point to it. I think that will answer Raju's question also. So it all depends upon what kind of an application you are building, correct? So who is responsible for UAT? Uh, Again, take an example of Amazon here. So let's say if Amazon pays a separate micro front end, you might not need to test that flow again in your UAT level E2Es or UAT level testing automation. You might just need to test that when I go to user profile or when I go to home page, there is a link available which can take me to the Amazon page. That's all. Because after that, everything is already covered as a part of your MFA. So it all depends on what application you are building, how you have split the micro frontends following the domain boundaries and all. If that is correct, you might never need to cover a lot of things in your E2E and like top application level E2Es. Yeah, and then
And as we have been highlighting, team collaboration might be needed depending your integration pattern. So as Vishal may have explained earlier, there are two kinds of integration pattern. One is build time and one is runtime. So as you might have seen our pipeline from the real projects where we had build time integration, and that another level of challenges. So based on if you have runtime, build time, a certain kind of collaboration might be needed with the other component or other MFA teams that you're working along with.
correct. And looking at all the advantages that we discussed here, correct? From very specific to testing. Like if I don't talk only testing, there are multiple more. But with respect to testing, you can see there are more advantages than challenges here. So biggest is you are a single team who is responsible for their own work. You're not dependent on anyone, and that's the biggest win in case of microservices and micro content works. So yeah, so that the last section of this talk comes like we talked about everything that can go independent, but with those independence, there is a small need of a collaboration also, correct? Because as a team, as different teams, you are building a same application. Maybe you have split it, but you are responsible for the whole end-to-end application also. And that is where we are saying that the communication between the different teams is a key at some level. Like if you are not building micro frontend, you're always together, correct? So maybe each micro frontend team has one QA or a two QA, depends upon the complexity of that feature or that domain. But as an application, those QAs, those teams have to come together to discuss what is the best suit for that for your domain plus from end-to-end application. And that is where we are saying that there has to be some shared guidelines with respect to testing also, where which can cover like all the teams might need to speak the same vocabulary. Maybe in the within the domain you have a different vocabulary. For example, a product catalog team is might call a product as a product, but a car team might call a product as an item. So that vocabulary can be different within the different teams, but as an application you need to talk about the same vocabulary on tech or business words also. Then you have to agree on terms of responsibility and ownership, correct? We have been exaggerating this point that each team owns their own MFE, but all the teams are responsibility for the quality of the whole app also. So that is where you have to define the right layers according to your project and according to your needs. Maintain proper documentation, testing guidelines and conventions. This is actually like we usually create testing strategy documents. We create ADR or decision records. We create dev strategies. This all be independent of your micro frontend plus at application level also. Or and then trying to maintain a global project scaffold also. So maybe if you want to quickly spin up a new micro frontend in your application, correct? If you have a scaffold with respect to your testing also, so maybe you build a scaffold says that all the micro frontend independently can use test cafe. So you have already giving that solution to any new team that is being bootstrapped, but don't make it hard and fast rule, because as we mentioned that depends upon your need, you should be applicable to change that also. So make it optional. And in the end, like as I mentioned, that different QAs have to come together to make sure the whole quality of the whole application is intact. That is where the idea of guilds comes into picture. So we have multiple type of guilds. Maybe front end guild is there, analytic guilds, UX guild, UI guild. Similar to that, you can always create your quality guild. Maybe once a week, once a month, whatever suits you. All the QAs should come together, share their findings, share uh, how they have actually solved a particular testing issue in their domain, so that the other teams can take help of those also. So these kind of things are very, very helpful when you are building separate independent teams. And by saying that, we are saying that it's all advantages are there, but there are challenges also. So that's why we are saying micro front end architecture in itself, with respect to all the different ways, is a marathon. It's not a sprint. You are not going to tackle it in a week or a day. It will take time to build into your system and understanding it, how what are the best practices to follow. And that is where we end this talk and open up for Q&A. I hope we are on time.
Yes, Vishal, we are on time. Thanks for the time
Cool.
check.
So,
So we had few
yeah,
questions. I think those were mostly answered.
yeah. So we have opened the Q&A sessions. Anybody have any questions, you can type in the Q&A tab. And in the meantime, thanks Vishal and Brijendra for the wonderful talk on testing strategy in micro-frontend architecture.
Thank you.
So until folks write their questions, maybe one of the key takeaways that you can think of via this session is whenever you are going into initial level discussion, when a team is forming and your product level discussion is happening, at that point of time, if you have that aha moment where you say, okay, now we see slicing can be happened and independent teams can be formed, and this will give you certain kind of independence and a faster feedback ways of testing, then why not suggest it to your architect and have a discussion on that front and create those isolation teams.
We all have seen the advantages in microservice world, correct? Most of us had worked, are still working in that world. Same applies on micro front end. And think about the application, or think about the split that you have, correct? You're totally independent now, no matter only on the backend side, but on the front end side also. You don't need to worry about what other teams are actually breaking. So you are never ever actually dependent or blocked because of other features or other teams now. But again, till the time you are not taking it to the production, correct? So productionize, you have to make sure the whole application is working fine. So I don't think there is any new question. I
No,
hope
there's
the whole
no questions.
Yeah. So I hope the whole talk had made sense. Any feedback, anything, please share with us. And after saying that, I think we got a new question.
Thank you guys. That's the question from Raju.
Okay, I have question.
Raju have one question.
Okay, we're waiting.
Meanwhile, Raju types the question. We will be sharing feedback form, guys, after the end of the second session. Please do give us the feedback. Yeah, Bharat, you were saying something?
No, I'm just saying Raju believes in suspense.
Let's give him a minute. No, now we got the question. Okay.
Okay, so when we say a UAT level test, then you might have seen in our Swiss cheese model where we say we have a complete independence of testing our application on MFE component level. But there is another component layer is required, correct? An application level smoke sanity test. And those are not very heavy tests. These are the basic integration test. And as per the responsibility, I would say here is where the collaboration is needed, where you discuss, you understand your scope of work, you have some kind of guild, as Vishal is highlighting, you need to have some kind of testing guild where you discuss your approaches, divide your work, and contribute in that repository where you say, this is how I would say my component is being certified in the final app. So it's a shared responsibility, one line answer.
Maybe when you start creating that E2E test, that is where guild will definitely come into picture. But if you are meeting this set of QAs together, correct, they will understand like what is what level of testing is missing in independent MFEs, and that is where you need to cover at the top level. And that should not be like a lot of tests, correct? Because you should be covering those in your MFE level or at the unit level. This should be very, very small, very, very simple, or again, user journey tests only. Yeah, with that, I think that's all. Thanks a lot. Rich and Vishal signing off.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, Vishal and Vijay.